The morning sun slipped gently through the white curtains of a small Washington, D.C. apartment. Karoline Levitt sat by the window, a warm cup of black coffee beside her. She wore her blue light glasses, quietly working through an online crossword puzzle. Her stylus moved across the tablet screen. 7-letter word, she whispered to herself. Musical term meaning very loud. She paused, thinking. Fortissimo, she said with a soft smile, typing it in. It was a peaceful moment, rare for someone with her schedule. At only 27, Karoline was the youngest White House press secretary in history. Sharp, confident, always prepared. She had stood in front of furious reporters, political storms, and national scandals. Her words could calm chaos or spark headlines. But this morning, she wasn't thinking about the press or politics. She was thinking about music. The sudden ringing of her phone broke the silence. She sighed, checked the caller ID, and answered. Karoline, it's Sophie from the campaign. A cheerful voice rang out. You sitting down? Karoline chuckled. Should I be worried? Not unless you're allergic to fun. Listen, Rising Star is holding open auditions in Manhattan next week. Karoline blinked. The singing show? Sophie, you've got the wrong Leave It. I give press statements, not performances. I'm serious, Sophie said. I heard you sing at Mia's wedding. You silenced the whole room. Even Father John had tears in his eyes. Karoline laughed nervously. That was just a song. A favor. The real singer was sick. Doesn't matter. You were amazing. Just think about it. After they hung up, Karoline leaned back in her chair. She glanced at a nearby photo frame. Her and her late husband, Nicholas, dancing at their wedding. In the photo, she was singing 1,000 Years softly in his ear. That night was the last time she truly believed in her voice. The world had moved on. She had become a name, a headline, a strategist. Music was just something she hummed while putting Nico, her 3-year-old, son to sleep. That evening, Karoline stood in front of her bathroom mirror. She looked into her own eyes. There were fine lines around them now, but the same fire. She softly began to hum again. It was shaky at first, then stronger. In her mind, she was 17, again, standing on her high school stage. She remembered her music teacher, Miss Carter, saying coldly, "You have a decent voice, but no fire. Stick to something practical, maybe politics." That sentence changed everything. The next morning, something unexpected happened. Sophie had uploaded a short clip from Mia's wedding. It showed Karoline singing, eyes closed, voice full of feeling. In less than 24 hours, the video had 500,000 views. Comments poured in. Is that Karoline Levitt? Why is the press secretary hiding that voice? I cried, watching this. By afternoon, Karoline's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Ms. Levitt, a smooth voice said, "This is Ethan Brooks, producer at Rising Star. We saw a video of you singing at a wedding." Karoline's heart skipped. I didn't send any video. Well, someone did, Ethan said, amused. But I'm glad they did. We'd like to invite you to perform on our next show. Just one song, no pressure. We'll handle flights, hotel, everything. Karoline didn't respond right away. Her mind raced. Sing? On national television? That's a lot, she finally said. It is, Ethan agreed. But you've got something rare. That voice, that honesty. It hits people. What he didn't say was what the production team had written in their private notes. PR content. That meant her segment would bring buzz, maybe laughter, but nothing more. Singers like her were invited to create noise, not win. But Karoline didn't know that. She sat quietly in her apartment long after the call ended. Outside, the sun began to set. painting the city orange and gold. She touched the wedding photo again. Remembered Nicholas's voice. You don't need permission to be who you are. Was this her chance to find the part of herself she had buried? Was this a moment of return, or a trap disguised as opportunity? The mic was being handed to her, but no one, not even the producers, were ready for what would happen next. A voice in the shadows. Karoline stared at the flight confirmation email on her phone. The subject line read, Your rising star travel details. Her fingers hovered over the screen, uncertain. She hadn't told anyone in the White House. She hadn't even told her mother. Only Nicholas knew, and his voice had been gentle when she called him. You're not doing this to prove anything, he had said. You're doing this to remember who you were. Now, standing in her bedroom at 5 a.m., suitcase half-packed, Karoline wasn't sure who she was anymore. Was she still the fearless press secretary who once took on 2 global correspondents and a senator in a single briefing? Or was she a tired 27-year-old mother who missed the girl who used to dream under the stars with a song in her throat? She zipped up her bag and quietly stepped into the hallway, careful not to wake Nico. Before she left, she pressed a kiss to his forehead and whispered, I'll be back soon. Promise. New York was colder than she expected. The Manhattan air had that hard, wet bite of early spring. Her driver, hired by the show, picked her up at LaGuardia with a nameplate that read, K. Levitt. No reporters, no questions, just cameras waiting, inside the studio. She was taken to a glass-walled dressing room at the Rising Star set. A flurry of stylists swarmed her, speaking quickly, eyes trained on her features like a canvas. One of them whispered to another, She's smaller than she looks on TV. Karoline sat in silence as her makeup was done. She wasn't nervous, yet, but something felt off. Across the hallway, she caught a glimpse of Logan Pierce, the show's host, rehearsing lines in front of a mirror. He was smooth, handsome, and just arrogant enough to be adored on late-night television. They're calling her the singing press secretary, he muttered with a smirk. We'll see. Later that afternoon, Karoline stood in the rehearsal hall alone. A piano player named Jerry, kind and older, adjusted his bench and nodded. Your song? He asked. 1,000 years, she replied. If that's okay. He nodded again. Good choice. It's not about the notes. It's about heart. She took a breath and began softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Jerry's hands slowed over the keys as her voice opened up. Soft, steady, real. He didn't smile. He just listened. When she finished, he said, They think you're here to make noise, but you're here to say something. Karoline swallowed hard. Why do you say that? Because people who just want attention don't sing like that. That evening, as showtime neared, Karoline sat quietly backstage. She had reviewed the teleprompter earlier, and that's when she saw it. Under her name was a scripted introduction. White House Press Secretary Karoline Levitt, here to try something totally out of her league, singing. And then, worse, another line just before her performance. Well, if I mess this up, at least I can go back to arguing with reporters. She hadn't written those words. Someone had planned this to make her look like a joke. She stared at the lines. Her fingers clenched. But she didn't say anything. Not yet. The production assistant came to collect her. Her mic was checked. Her dress was adjusted. The lights dimmed. She heard the audience laughing at a comedian just before her. Then Logan's voice echoed through the hall. Up next, someone who's not just used to answering tough questions, but now trying to hit high notes. Please welcome the one and only Karoline Levitt. Applause. Some laughter. The stage lights shifted. Karoline stepped out. Her heart pounded. Her heels clicked softly across the stage floor. She held the mic. The spotlight hit her full in the face, and for one split second all she could see was white. But behind the white, memories flooded in. Her son's sleepy eyes, her husband's arms around her on their wedding day, and her 17-year-old self standing in a high school auditorium just before her music teacher crushed her dream. She took a breath. This was not a press briefing. This was something more. And as the first few notes of 1,000 Years played, Karoline Leavitt did the one thing no one had expected. She sang with truth, and she sang with fire. Karoline's voice drifted through the Rising Star studio like a slow-moving wave, gentle at first, then building with strength. The first few lines came soft, measured, full of breath and restraint. But then, in the middle of the second verse, something changed. She lifted her eyes, not just to meet the audience, but as if looking back in time. Her voice rose, warm and rich, and for a moment, the crowd stopped breathing. No laughter, no whispers, just silence. Even Logan Pierce, backstage in mid-sip, from his sparkling water, lowered the glass. The producers, who had queued her up for comic relief, now looked at each other in disbelief. Who told her to sing like that? Someone whispered into a headset. She wasn't supposed to actually be good, another replied. From behind the stage curtain, a camera crew caught her expression. She wasn't performing. She was remembering. Remembering the soft lullabies she used to sing to Nico when he had night terrors. Remembering how her husband used to say, "Your voice makes the whole room feel like it's exhaling." She was more than a press secretary tonight. She was an artist reclaiming something stolen. By the end of the song, the room hadn't moved. No cheers, no clapping, just stillness. And then, a single clap, then two. Then the whole room stood, erupting in applause so loud it rattled the cameras. Karoline's eyes welled up. She lowered, her head slightly, offering a humble nod before walking off stage. Logan met her in the wings, stunned. I didn't know you had that in you," he said, blinking. Karoline smiled. "Neither did you. But I always did." Backstage, things shifted quickly. The senior producer, a tall woman with a strict bun and a tighter schedule, marched down the hall, headset crackling. "Get her mic off now. I need her in the interview room in 5. Karoline was ushered into a side room with velvet chairs and white lighting. A bottle of water waited for her, untouched. A young assistant sat across from her, flipping through cue cards. "Okay," the assistant said quickly. "Next is the post-performance interview. It'll go out live on social. Nothing too political, okay? Keep it light, stay funny, maybe talk about how you weren't expecting this reaction. Mention your son. Audiences love that." Karoline tilted her head. "What if I don't want to be funny?" The assistant hesitated. "Well, the show's tone is usually—" "I'm not a tone," she cut in. "I'm a person." The assistant didn't argue. Moments later, Logan returned, this time with a camera crew behind him. He sat beside her, his grin rehearsed. "Ladies and gentlemen, she surprised us all tonight. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt. Karoline, welcome." "Thanks," she replied calmly. "That was, unexpected," Logan said. "We were all thinking politics and press briefings, but you gave us Adele-level vocals. Where did that come from?" Karoline smiled. "It came from a part of me I buried a long time ago." Logan chuckled nervously. "Did you expect the standing ovation?" "I didn't even expect to be taken seriously," she said. "I was invited here for amusement, but I came for myself." The audience watching online responded instantly. Comments flew in. "This is the realest moment on the show in years. She's got pipes and a brain. Karoline Leavitt just became a national treasure." But not all comments were kind. Within seconds, the backlash began. A conservative anchor tweeted, "Why is our press secretary doing karaoke while inflation is rising?" A political commentator posted, "This is what happens when the government becomes entertainment." And inside a quiet office in D.C., the White House chief of staff stared at a muted TV screen showing Karoline's interview. He turned to his aide. "We need to talk to her, immediately." Later that night, Karoline sat alone in her hotel room. Nico's voice played in her voicemail, saying goodnight. She wiped off her makeup slowly, remembering how that stage had felt under her shoes, how she'd seen strangers cry in the crowd, how she'd felt free. But her phone buzzed again. A message from her deputy back at the White House. "They're spinning your performance. Call us first thing in the morning. And be ready." Karoline stared at the screen, then looked at her reflection in the mirror. She'd stepped on stage to sing, but now, it seemed, she'd started a storm. The mic wasn't the only thing recording. Karoline woke to a buzzing phone. 5 missed calls, 14 messages, and a dozen tagged videos of her performance going viral. She rubbed her eyes, sat upright in her hotel bed, and opened the first video. It had already reached 2.3 million views. One clip showed her singing the final high note. Another showed the audience rising to their feet. But the video making rounds in Washington circles was different. It was a backstage moment. A hidden camera had captured Logan Pierce minutes before Karoline performed. He was laughing. "Press secretary thinks she can outsing a barista. Let her try. It'll be comedy gold," Logan said, grinning at his assistant. Karoline froze. That clip was spreading now, and public opinion was turning. At 9 a.m., Karoline walked into a private press room at the White House. Her deputy, Julia, stood by the door with a stack of briefings and a tight expression. "They're spinning." Julia said flatly. "Let me guess," Karoline replied. "I'm unprofessional, out of touch, distracting the country with song." Julia nodded. "And here's the problem. It's working. Some senators are calling for a closed-door inquiry. Your clearance level is being questioned. They're asking if you broke confidentiality agreements by appearing on entertainment television." Karoline sat down, crossing her legs slowly. "I didn't reveal anything classified. I sang a song." "You sang with soul," Julia said. "That scares them more than secrets." Across town, a live panel on a major news channel debated the situation. A conservative strategist said, "She used a reality show stage to raise her personal brand. This isn't leadership, it's vanity." A liberal commentator countered, "Let's not pretend male politicians haven't done worse. Remember the senator who juggled oranges on a kids' talent show?" But the final guest, a former CIA analyst, said something that caught attention. "We're not asking the right question. We're so focused on her singing, we've missed the reaction of the people in that room." Something shifted. Did you see the faces? That wasn't applause for talent. That was trust. By midday, Karoline received a confidential text. "Unknown. Number. Someone leaked your Rising Star invitation file. They marked you as PR bait. They never expected you to succeed." Beneath the message was an image, her Rising Star intake sheet. A red stamp read, "PR, Temp Spotlight." She closed her eyes. It wasn't just a stunt. It was a setup. Someone had wanted her to fail publicly, to make her a joke. And now that, she hadn't. They were scrambling to contain her. At 2 p.m., Karoline was called into a closed-door meeting in the West Wing. Inside were 3 people. The White House Chief of Staff, a National Security Advisor. A silent man in a gray suit, intelligence background, no doubt. "Karoline," the Chief of Staff began, "we need to understand what you were told before accepting the show offer." "I was invited. 1 song, 1 segment, no politics," she replied firmly. The intelligence man spoke next. Do you know who Ethan Brooks really is? Karoline narrowed her eyes. The producer? He used to run media operations in political campaigns, funded by 2 major firms with connections to opposition research groups. His show has been used before, to bait high-profile figures into viral moments, some harmless, some not. Karoline leaned forward. So you think this was a trap? We don't think. We know, the man said. Your file was leaked before the episode aired, before you even said yes. Her stomach turned. Not only had they tried to embarrass her, they'd coordinated it. But it backfired, she said quietly. People connected. That's why they're panicking. Yes, the chief of staff replied. But the bigger the connection, the bigger the threat. Silence hung in the room. Then the advisor added, We can pull you out of the spotlight for a few weeks. Keep you off the press briefings. Say you're on personal leave. Karoline shook her head. No, that's exactly what they want. The advisor's expression sharpened. If you step up now, they'll dig deeper. Everything, your marriage, your child, your past mistakes. Karoline stared at them, unmoved. They already started, she whispered. Later that evening, Karoline walked past flashing cameras. Outside her apartment. Reporters shouted questions. Karoline, do you regret singing on national TV? Are you going to resign? She paused, then turned to face them. Her voice, steady and low, cut through the chaos. I was invited to sing. I sang. That's not a scandal. That's being human. Then she walked inside, quietly shutting the door. But across the city, another door opened. In a dark glass-walled office, a man stepped into view. He turned to an aide. Begin phase 2. If she won't fall quietly, we'll force the spotlight to burn her. The next morning, a story broke. Headline: Press Secretary's husband, once investigated in foreign contract probe. Karoline sat in her kitchen, staring at the screen. Nico, her 5-year-old son, sat nearby eating cereal, unaware his mother's world was shaking. She read the article slowly, her hand gripping the edge of the table. It was all twisted facts. Nicholas had briefly consulted for a logistics firm 6 years ago, long before they met. The company was once reviewed for questionable dealings, overseas, but no charges were ever filed. Still, the story had one purpose: to smear her through proximity. Her phone buzzed again. CNN, MSNBC, and even tabloids now ran variations of the story. It was spreading faster than truth could keep up. Julia called. They're attacking the foundation now, she said grimly. Next, they'll dig into your father's lawsuit, even if it's unrelated. Karoline looked at a framed photo of her father, a retired school principal who once sued the local board over ethics violations. He had won, but his name was controversial for years. How much more are they willing to pull? She asked. Julia was quiet. As much as it takes. You lit a fire they didn't expect. Now they're trying to drown it in dirt. That afternoon, a request came in. Live interview, prime time, with Diane Graves, a renowned journalist known for her sharp, no-nonsense style. You should do it, Julia urged. You'll be seen, heard, on your own terms. Karoline hesitated. They want to box me in, humiliate me. Graves doesn't go easy on anyone. But if you avoid it, Julia warned, they'll say you're hiding. Karoline looked into the mirror again. Not the one at home. The green room mirror of her youth, of her wedding, of her grief. This time her reflection was still. I'll do it. The studio was dim, sleek, and cold. Diane Graves sat across from her in a navy suit. The lights turned red. Cameras live. Karoline, Diane began. "You're not here as the press secretary tonight. You're here as a citizen, a mother, a woman who sang on national television and triggered a political earthquake." Karoline nodded slowly. "That's fair. Let's start with this. Do you regret it?" "No," Karoline said instantly. "Because it wasn't about ego. It was about honesty. I let people see something real." Diane leaned forward. "And now that real is being weaponized. Headlines about your husband, whispers about your father. Some are calling you unfit." Karoline paused, then looked straight into the lens. "Then let them call me unfit for being human, for having a husband with a past, for loving a father who fought corruption, for being someone who sings to her child at night. If that's unfit, maybe it's the system that needs rethinking." A beat of silence. Diane blinked, surprised. Then, she asked, "Did you know your appearance was part of a PR trap?" "I found out after," Karoline said. "They wanted a meme, a joke, a footnote. But what they got was connection." "You've become a symbol to many," Diane said. "Some say you're rising too fast, too loud, too visible." Karoline smiled slightly. "Maybe. But maybe I'm just not hiding anymore." Backstage, as the segment ended, Karoline walked off the platform into a hallway with dim lights and a long stretch of silence. An older man approached her quietly. "I used to work intelligence," he said, flashing credentials discreetly. "Your performance on Rising Star, that wasn't just a trap. It was a test." She narrowed her eyes. "A test by whom?" "Multiple parties. Your name's been circulating for a while. Not just in politics, in something bigger." Karoline's heart thudded. "Why me?" "Because your voice, literal and political, does something rare. It crosses boundaries, threatens the old games." He handed her a small envelope. Inside was a photo. Grainy, taken from a satellite. It showed 3 figures in a distant compound overseas. One of them was Ethan Brooks, the producer who invited her to sing. "This isn't just entertainment," the man said softly. "This is a message, and you were never supposed to deliver it that well." Later that night, as Karoline returned home, she stood on her balcony. The city was quiet, blanketed in clouds. Behind her, Nico's laughter echoed from the hallway, as Julia helped him build a puzzle. Karoline held the photo in one hand. Her other hand rested on her heart. She didn't know what exactly she had stepped into. But she knew one thing. This wasn't the climax. This was the midpoint. The point where the music fades and the next storm begins. And she wouldn't go silent again. They wanted her silenced, but the stage got louder. The next morning began with silence, but not the good kind. Karoline opened her eyes to dozens of messages from private numbers. Her email had been flooded. Julia called early. "We need to talk." By 8 a.m., her office was under review. Government aides were standing by her desk with neutral faces and quiet voices. "What's going on?" she asked. One of them handed her a printed memo from the Office of Internal Oversight. Subject: temporary suspension of security clearance, pending review. Karoline blinked, her hands tightening. It wasn't unexpected, but the timing was sharp. The interview had aired less than 12 hours ago, and yet someone had already triggered the review process. "They want you off the grid," Julia said over the phone. "Someone high up wants you sidelined before the next wave." Karoline didn't panic. But the chill in the room felt real now. Not just political, personal. She gathered her coat, left the office quietly, and walked through the Capitol's marble halls like a ghost. Reporters caught glimpses of her, but didn't dare shout questions. Outside, the sky was slate gray. Raindrops tapped her shoulders like warnings. That evening, she met with Julia in a private suite near the Washington Monument. Nicholas arrived with Nico, who ran into her arms. For a moment, everything else disappeared. But the walls around them weren't calm. Julia locked the door. Then she opened a briefcase. Inside was a small drive. I got this from someone who used to work with Homeland. He owed me a favor. Karoline took the drive and plugged it into the secure laptop. What she saw was a series of heavily redacted documents, names blurred, timestamps visible. One name repeated again and again: Ethan Brooks, the man who invited her to Rising Star. Why would a music show producer be tagged in Homeland surveillance files? Karoline asked. Julia answered quietly. Because he's not just a producer. One file was clearer than the rest. It listed meetings in Istanbul, Munich, and Dubai. One audio file had a conversation between Ethan and someone speaking in German, discussing the visibility experiment. It was all a test, Julia said. They use cultural platforms to trigger political reactions, track how the public responds, see who becomes a liability or an asset. Karoline stared at the screen. So I was never just singing. No, Julia said. You were lighting a fuse. The next day, Diane Graves called again. They've sent an official response, she said. The administration's press office had released a subtle statement calling Karoline's performance unexpected and potentially destabilizing. But that wasn't all. A foreign newspaper, the Kiev Sentinel, had published a column suggesting that Karoline's song had sparked protests in 2 authoritarian countries. The lyrics were translated and used on banners in underground rallies. No one planned that, Karoline said. That wasn't me. Doesn't matter, Diane replied. They think it was. And in this world, perception was often more powerful than truth. That night, Karoline was invited to a private gathering at a historical library near Georgetown. It wasn't a political event. It was personal. She entered cautiously. Only 6 people were present. Among them was Senator Marius Chen, a quiet figure known for steering defense committees behind the scenes. He didn't offer greetings. Just a statement. The system you work for is about to turn against you. Karoline nodded. It already has. Another woman, older and dressed in gray, stepped forward. You now have 3 options: fade, fight, or lead. Karoline raised an eyebrow. Lead what? The older woman handed her a card. It had no name, no number, just a symbol. A tree split down the middle, half burnt, half in bloom. There's a group, she said. Born from what's broken. Watching from the inside. Waiting for someone with a voice that people actually listen to. Sounds dramatic, Karoline said quietly. Only because it's real, the woman replied. Karoline looked at the card. She thought of the stage. The moment the crowd had gone silent. The rising tide since then. Her father's fight. Her husband's shadow. Her son's innocence. She pocketed the card. Then she looked at Senator Chen. You're right, she said. The system's turning, so let's give it something new to spin toward. The senator nodded. Careful, if you take this path, there's no going back. Karoline didn't hesitate. I don't plan to go back, she said. Only forward. And the lights outside, faint and flickering through the rain, didn't look like threats anymore. They looked like a stage. One the whole world was now watching. Karoline stood alone at the edge of the rooftop terrace, overlooking the lights of Washington, D.C. The wind was light, but carried weight, like everything else now. Behind her, the quiet meeting had ended. The others had gone. But the card remained, in her pocket, its symbol pressed against her fingertips like a quiet vow. Her phone vibrated. One message. From Sophie. Call me. Now. You're trending worldwide. Again. Karoline stared at the screen, then tapped open the news. There it was, her rising star clip, the song, the crowd's reaction, and the moment she looked straight into the camera, now viewed over 92 million times. But that wasn't the real shock. Underneath the video, breaking headlines from international outlets, Karoline Leavitt's song sparks protests in Eastern Bloc. White House press secretary becomes symbol of free expression. Russian news anchor resigns on air, quotes Leavitt's lyrics. It wasn't about politics anymore. It was something bigger, something human. Julia called. Karoline, listen to me. Homeland, state, even international advisors, they're calling you the catalyst. Karoline didn't reply. Julia continued, her voice sharper, urgent. You were meant to be silenced, a controlled PR stunt, a harmless voice to distract people. But instead, you woke them up. Karoline turned away from the city, pacing slowly. She remembered that stage, the heavy lights, the mocking smile of the host when he handed her the mic, the silence that followed her first note, the tears she saw in the front row, the one sentence from the judge. This wasn't a performance. This was a warning. And now, governments were debating her. Protesters were quoting her lyrics. Tanks were analyzing her tone. She had unintentionally done what years of diplomatic pressure had failed to achieve. She had made people feel again. But with that came danger. Julia said quietly, "There's talk of removing you quietly. No scandal, no press. Just reassignment. Disappear from public view." Karoline's voice was calm. "So it's real?" "Yes. And they're scared of you now." Karoline walked inside and opened a drawer. Inside it was her father's old recorder. He'd used it in the 90s, when he was a journalist uncovering corrupt city officials. He always told her, "Truth isn't what you say. It's what survives after you're gone." She picked it up, hit record, and began to speak. "This is Karoline Leavitt. If you're hearing this, it means I've chosen not to hide. It means they couldn't silence me, and they won't silence others. This isn't about politics anymore. This is about voice. Voice against fear. Voice against control. And if singing a song is enough to terrify the powerful, then I'll sing again." She stopped the recording and smiled.